All right. Hello, folks. Thank you so much for joining our session. We'll be talking about how to curate AI strategy and what's a typical new playbook for growth, innovation, and transformation. I have my fellow panelists, and we would be talking about what's understanding why do we need a AI strategy, how do we craft one of a best in kind AI strategy, what are some of the challenges that organizations face in realizing this transformative value for their organizations. So, without much ado, let me quickly start with our first question with our first panelist, Pradnesh. So, Pradnesh, based on your experience consulting multiple companies across the globe and now being at the core of doing an AI work for the top retailer of the country, why do we need an AI strategy? Is it really a CEO or a board member or a boardroom agenda, or is it just like another topic for to feel happy about it for people like you and me?
First of all, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I think the question is quite pertinent. What you're saying is, why do we need an AI strategy? I mean, if you really look at how we are going through in the current business risk that the world is facing, I think every risk has multiple opportunities, and if you are ready with your AI strategy, you are able to obviously take advantage of um, all the risks and convert them into opportunities. And that's what I've seen while consulting with a lot of companies on the West Coast. You saw, I mean, we are all still seeing the crisis unfolding on the Russia and the Ukraine side, and we saw that a lot of energy and utility companies taking advantage of the fact that they were able to. They had an AI strategy in place. Many energy and utility companies, not all of them, and just giving an example of a use case where a lot of energy power outage happening in the US, and
Mhm.
many of these companies which had an AI strategy in place, they were able to take advantage of it, and you couldn't really suddenly recruit many call center agents to take those many calls, and we had voice-based AI agents taking advantage of that and responding to the calls of the customers that, hey, there is a power outage, and the AI agent was trained to respond to that. So wherever I mean, in the current world, especially, it is quite pertinent in the current world where there are many risks unfolding every day. When you wake up, there is some new risk that you have to cater to, and that risk essentially, if you have a right business model, and if you have
Mhm.
an AI strategy that suits your business model, you can convert that risk into an opportunity.
Mhm.
This was just one example of how this is being unfolded by many organizations which have the right AI strategy that suits the business model that they have. Is it? I think the second or a corollary question of that was: is it really a CEO or a board chatter? There are organizations which are not talking about it for sure, but there are many, starting with including a small startup that I had worked with in the valley, in the Silicon Valley, to, let's say, talk about the largest parcel shipping companies in the world. I mean, it is a charter. I've seen that as
Mhm.
it's been a charter for many years. Charter has changed a bit since the introduction of the GPT-based models. You cannot obviously not talk about
Mhm.
generative AI. It's changed a bit, but the AI strategy has not changed, is what I've seen. You're not allowing, at least what I have seen, you're not allowing the core of your business model to be touched by generative AI. That is something that I'm seeing right
Mhm.
now. At least large organizations, large enterprise organizations. Maybe in the startup case it is not true, but in the enterprise space, you're still
Mhm.
not allowing generative AI to touch the core of your whatever is the brain of your organization. They're still operating on the periphery. There are a lot of MVPs, a lot of POCs happening. Whether they will come in at the heart of the whether the heart surgery will be performed immediately, that I think remains to be seen.
Got it. So a good charter definitely, and something good strategy ideally should be suiting the business model because it helps you generate better opportunity and hence imperative to have an AI strategy. Brilliant. So let's build on top of it. Sid, if you can come in now, you have been an ex-consultant as well, been an industry veteran, and have been associated with multiple startups. Now, based on your experience, how do you write or craft such a strategy that gives you this kind of a competitive advantage and What are the key elements of such strategy which should be part of the CEO agenda?
Yeah. So like Pradnesh mentioned, right? Pretty much most Fortune 500 companies have AI as one of the top five priorities now, if not the top five, the top 10 priorities. It comes through in investor presentations. It comes through everywhere, and so there's a general excitement around this, right? While AI always was playing a part, I think generative AI has kind of stirred the pot in boardrooms as well as in most CEO discussions, right? So there's excitement, there is anxiety. Excitement because Gen AI helps democratize AI. So you don't really need to be a master's or an advanced analytics or statistics to kind of
Mm-hmm.
drive value. You could, there is uh, a business manager could also kind of take significant, impact through, right? And there is anxiety because the tech is outpacing the business
Mm-hmm.
in that sense of it, right? And so therefore having a strategy uh, that goes beyond a POC, which is where
Mm-hmm.
most companies have been in the last couple of years, and taking that POC to scale becomes very critical, right? S- there are three big pieces in my mind that I've seen where we've seen success, right? So one is uh, something that we always talk about is always have your focus on what will drive value. Um, the second
Mm-hmm.
is how do you think through rallying the entire enterprise, right? It's not about a team. How do you rally the entire enterprise? And then the third is how do you manage risks, understand and manage risks. So if you think about the first one, which is focusing on value, it starts with what are the top
Mm-hmm.
use cases that will deliver value. That's the way you move the
Mm-hmm.
organization forward, and then you kind of continue from there. But then it's also very important to understand what will it take to realize the value, right? The value could come from building a model per se, but then how do you push that
Mm-hmm.
model into the day-to-day processes and realize that value across the organization is probably much more critical. We've seen how many digital transformations fail because of that, right? um,
Mm-hmm.
and the focus has to shift on how do you realize value versus how do you kind of build a POC alone, standalone. When it comes
Mm-hmm.
to rallying the enterprise, right? How do you build a how do you go from building a siloed capability of a few data scientists attempting to kind of do the next big model versus how do you build an institutional capability is a very big piece here, Rajat.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about, do you have a very strong digital team or is your entire company digitally savvy, right? I think that's
Mm-hmm.
the piece that everyone would want to kind of think about. And so therefore the commitment in building such a team to build such skill sets becomes very important. I think three or four different strategies that come into picture is how do you cross pollinate skill sets, because
Mm-hmm.
you've got a very strong capability in terms of your teams, but they're not technically that savvy. So there's a chance
Mm-hmm.
the talent becomes obsolete after a certain time. So how do you build the skill set, cross pollinate skill sets? Perhaps having an executive
Mm-hmm.
sponsor who sits at the board, who kind of oversees the entire strategy, is very critical, right? And having a very
Mm-hmm.
methodical way of promoting a culture of using AI becomes very critical. So these are some of the things that you could do to rally the enterprise. And then the third is around understanding risks. Risks
Got it.
come with privacy, with reputation risks that come alongside this. There are newer risks in terms of fairnesses and biases that um, models will have to consider, IP protection risks and all, and finally the environmental risks that come along with it. So I think there is a whole bunch of
Mm-hmm.
these pieces that you need to really think about as you think of your entire AI strategy.
Awesome. I think all valid points, especially I mean, all three valid points: value, railing the organization, and of course the risk, not just the cyber risk, but even the overall sustainability part as well. So well touched actually on this part. Let me just make it push the needle a bit further. So, Rajneesh, I'll bring you here now. Now, you've been again part of an organization which has been implementing such strategy, and I think implementation is a critical part of any good strategy. And somebody you have been at the forefront of implementing that. What challenges do you see organization face while implementing such strategies on the ground?
Right. So, Rajat, what we have seen is that depending on where a firm is on their Gen AI journey and what is their level of maturity, what is their readiness of the ecosystem, the challenges and both building and implementing Gen AI strategy could be slightly different. But if we look at some broad set of challenges, two broad things which emerges almost across all Gen AI strategy implementation. The first challenge emerges from the fact that the core understanding of the Gen AI technology, its ecosystem, what its capabilities are, and what their limitations are. And foremost, what is the economic value with the Gen AI use case which generate is still not very transparent to lots of front-end executives. What it does is the implementing this strategy into a frontline in a day-to-day operation in a scaled way becomes a lot more challenging because it requires understanding, it requires risk taking because Gen AI also comes with a set of its risks. If you're not comfortable with the concept itself, it becomes a little slow in the implementation. However, we have seen that if there is a executive sponsorship, as Siddharth was saying, there is a fair bit of budget, there is a partner ecosystem, it becomes the firms still do that. On the other hand, the firms which do not have these elements, the process transformation and associated change management with the scale Gen AI implementation tends to become very hard. It becomes many a times bottleneck into the value realization. Many are okay just doing the POC and experimentation, but the scaled implementation tends to become very hard for them. The second challenge that I see is the need and effort for retooling the whole enterprise. Gen AI is a new technology. It requires people to be trained on the Gen AI concepts. It requires people to understand the new tools. The processes would be transformed and someone needs to be trained on that. This is one other area where I see that lots of implementation going really slow, where the enterprise is not retooled or not ready for really implementing the Gen AI strategy and generating value out of it. So I would say at a broad level, these are the two set of challenges, and there are many sub challenges associated with it. That do you have to build it in house, or do you do it with a partner? Do you buy talent, or do you nurture talent? There are a series of the things which comes under these two umbrellas.
Good, all good inputs, I think. So let's keep build on this. So Sid, I think you alluded to this point, rallying the entire organization. Now, one of the components that we keep hearing is improving the overall AI literacy, data literacy, by having right set of bilinguals, translators, purple people, or whatever fancy name we can have that. Now, I believe that these are very critical for the right adoption of AI in the organization. So, how do you develop them, and how does a chief AI officer use them to its advantage for better adoption and better scaling?
Yeah. If you think about, most why most digital transformations or data transformations fail, it's not because there was lack of technology or or lack of understood business value, but it was really about why the realization of business value didn't really happen, right? And one of the big reasons for that is because while there was perhaps a team that was sitting in their silo a few arm's distance from the business, trying to develop a model which couldn't really get implemented because the business really didn't understand how to really absorb this, right? And that's where the bilinguals and the translators really come into picture, is to say, how could I bridge that gap between technology and the business? And so these are people who really understand the business, who probably emerge from the business, but also have a fairly good understanding of technology and its application. Now, that technology here could be AI, Gen AI, or whatsoever, right? And so therefore they are inherent to every part of the use case development. This is essentially a very critical role. It's almost a between glue to make everything work, right? And so therefore one big commitment the organization needs to do is to perhaps pick up some of these champions from the business. These are typically early adopters. These are typically champions who are champions of technology, um, and then develop them to kind of have the skill set that can then rally the organization, right? So typically in the senior middle management or the middle management, you find you find a few such early adopters. This is extremely critical for the CDO, CIO, uh, because extraction of value kind of relies very heavily on having such people on board, right? And so that's how we've seen that succeed, Rajat.
Got it. This is brilliant, actually. Especially, I love the point that you made, and it's a glue which brings all of them together and make it happen. Brilliant. So, moving to the last question with Pradnesh. Now, again, based on what you have seen in your experience, how critical is change management in this particular entire schema of AI-led business transformation? Be it AI, Gen AI, how have you seen change management enabling this and delivering the last mile value for the organizations?
Rajat, I think there are two sets of enterprises that I have worked with. One is clearly a digital native enterprise
Mm-hmm.
where change management is, for the lack of a better word, is slightly easier.
Mm-hmm.
Where the organization themselves, inside out, is a digital organization.
Mm-hmm.
The non-native organizations is where the change management is quite pertinent, and you have to give a lot of thought to making sure that every function within the organization is basically implementing, is looking at change management, and or rather is being considered as a stakeholder for change management.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the way to look at it and the way to make sure that your specific use case is successful is, however small the use case is, if you have a sponsorship from the right managerial leadership, even if it is a peripheral use case, just go for it. Get the organization excited about the initiatives, and
Mm-hmm.
change management will be far, far easier for you.
Got it. Got it. So have pick up the right use case which has the CEO sponsorship, start small but scale up big, and ensure that you continue to demonstrate incremental value so that the next set of use cases get automatically funded. Brilliant.
Exactly. And and I think one more point, Rajat, sorry, is the idea of a user interface and user experience is quite is somehow lost sometimes. But whenever you're creating, or whenever you're creating these small apps or web apps inside the organization, if they have the right thought process and right design, human design, it
Yes.
becomes far, the adoption becomes far more easier, is my
Right.
experience.
I mean the UX or the human-centric design driving the last mile adoption for value.
Yes,
Brilliant.
exactly.
Right. With that, let me call it a wrap and hand it over back to Samir.
Thank you.